What about Frank Sobotka? I'm not hearing his name in here anywhere.
The union may be involved in the smuggling, but we're not getting a sense that it goes past that.
This is about Frank Sobotka.
The case is bigger now.
Look, Missy, this is my detail. I started it. Now I'm asking, do you have charges on Frank Sobotka?
Charging Sobotka at this point would lose us the wire and a chance at the real targets.
He is the real target.
Alex Cottrell and Toby Huntingford present Caught on the Wire. This podcast is an episode-by-episode analysis of HBO's widely acclaimed TV series about the city of Baltimore, its people, and its many problems. Find more information about the show and all the episodes online at caughtonthewire.wordpress.com. Hello. Welcome again to Caught on the Wire. I'm Alex Cottrell. I'm joined again by Toby Huntingford, and we're here for Season 2, Episode 9, Stray Rounds. Toby, I trust you're ready for another great episode.
Yep, things are really heating up in the docks and in the west side, so I'm very looking forward to this week, as always.
Have you been watching anything over the past week of note?
Season 2, Episode 9 of The Wire.
Other than The Wire?
I've been catching up with Better Call Saul. I'm not sure if I've chatted with you about Better Call Saul, actually.
Yeah, I must admit I've seen most of one of the most recent episodes, but it's all of it I've watched.
Yeah.
So I haven't watched it through yet. I do want to though, because what I saw of this episode looked great. It looks very well stylized, very beautifully shot, wonderfully acted. So
yeah,
definitely want to check it out.
I am up to speed almost. I know that there's one this week called 5-0, and I know it's very Mike heavy, but I haven't watched it yet. So I saw, I think it was Alpine Shepherd Boy yesterday. And things it's pretty good. It's very different to Breaking Bad, and I think I might have gone in with the wrong expectations. But I'm willing to give it a good chance to see where it goes, and it doesn't feel like it's going in a bad direction by any means, but it's just not quite what I expected, really. So
okay.
Yeah.
But you're enjoying it?
Yeah, I think so. I just keep annoyingly comparing it to season 1 of Breaking Bad, and Breaking Bad season 1 was such a thrill ride. Like this kind of remember the first 3 episodes, that kind of just non-stop action with Crazy Eight and all the hiding the bodies and stuff. It's a different show, and they're going for a much slower, more perhaps adult way of doing things. So yeah, I think it's good, but I'll give it its run. It's got 2 seasons already in the can. They've kind of got permission for them. So
excellent.
Yeah. Did
I catch you with your phone on there?
You did.
No phones in class, Toby.
That awful ping of the iOS. Yeah, don't worry, I've silenced that, so it won't be disturbed anymore. Have you been watching anything, or?
I have been watching quite a few documentaries, actually. I watched Hoop Dreams. Don't know if you've ever heard of that. It's quite a long documentary about these 2 kids wanting to be in the NBA. And it follows them through the kind of American system where you kind of get your scholarships and you're sort of a sportsman for the college whilst also getting a scholarship of some kind. It kind of follows that track.
Okay.
Really kind of heartbreaking story and very down to earth. Really nice. Very long as well, about 3 hours long. Very, very good.
For a documentary, that's huge, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, really, really long. And today, actually, I watched... I can't remember what it's called. The name's gone out of my mind. It's basically the follow-up to Restrepo, which was an Oscar-nominated documentary. Or maybe it won, actually, I'm not sure. But it was about these soldiers in Afghanistan, and they're in this very particular place in this valley that's like a long supply route, and documentary crew follows them, and they look at sort of the camaraderie and the everyday situations, and, it's a really... really kind of fly on the wall in deepest, darkest Afghanistan where they're fighting the Taliban.
Yeah. Okay.
And again, quite harrowing, but also uplifting, and definitely worth checking out. Both of them, that is, Restrepo and the follow-up, whose name I still can't remember.
Okay, yeah, I'll be sure to look into those, definitely. And I'm just looking forward to the final season of Mad Men and Game of Thrones returns. Both.
Yeah, April for Game of Thrones.
Yeah, both of those return within a month, so very excited.
Yeah, well, I'm sure we'll be slipping in little bits here and there about Game of Thrones whilst we catch up on it.
I think we might have to start having a big extras section if we get too excited about Game of Thrones, yeah, which is very likely considering the quality of that show.
Maybe we should. No, we can't start another podcast.
No, we got to finish what we started first before we move on to new things.
That would be good, though. Maybe that's the next thing.
Yeah,
Game of Thrones.
It's a very, very podcastable show, I think.
It's been done quite a lot already, though.
Yeah,
so
it's got a big...
The reason we started this is because there was a niche to be filled, whereas Game of Thrones is well trodden in the podcast arena, I think.
Yeah, there's some really big key podcasts that kind of have dominated that market already, which I do enjoy listening to. So it would be a very different kind of experience doing it for that show.
Because there's a pod of Cast and Cast of Kings.
Yeah, those are I think the Cast of Kings particularly is the big one with David Chen and Joanna Robinson.
Is that the Slashdot one you were talking about?
Yeah, David Chen of Slash Film. Yeah, he also does the Slash Film cast, which is one of the biggest kind of TV film podcasts around as well. So
yeah,
yeah,
nice. So let's move into Listener's Corner, as I'm going to call it. And in Listener's Corner, we're going to take a look at a couple of emails we've got, which we got a couple this week, which was nice. And our first one was from Alfred, who I think we've heard from a couple of times before. He sent me a video, actually, that was this. It was like a lecture, and this lady, she appears to be talking about how you can analyze rap lyrics with Python, the computer language, I think it is. I haven't actually watched the full video yet, but it looks very interesting. So if you like hip-hop and programming, then the two go together very, very well.
Okay.
Looks like a fascinating video. I think I'm going to watch it tomorrow. But Alfred's still enjoying the podcast and said that he kind of found that video after he listened to last week's episode. So, yeah, thanks for keeping along with us, Alfred.
Oh, right. So is that a related video to one of our podcasts, perhaps? Is that...
Yeah, I think maybe it was in the right-hand sidebar, and somehow the two have come to be.
YouTube's got some interesting, algorithms.
There's that period of time as any YouTube channel kind of starts off, and all of the related videos, it's still trying to find what it is you're actually related to. Eventually you get there.
Okay, that's fair enough. Yeah.
And then we got another email as well from Corey, who appears to be from Canada. So we got some international listeners, which is great. And he's just saying that he really likes the podcast, saying that it's nicely done and that he found us on Google, which is good because I haven't really done anything related to Google, so it's nice that people are finding us through that. He says there's no point in looking for another. And I don't know if we've mentioned this before, but a couple of podcasts similar to ours have cropped up since we've started.
Oh, right. Which is news to me.
I don't know if we have anything to do with that. It's also likely that the HD release. The HD release may have prompted a lot of people to kind of get their box sets out, dust them off, and check out the show again. So that's another possible catalyst. I have found a couple of others. There's Rewired is another one doing something very similar, but they're doing it where one of them, where one of them hasn't seen it before. So there's two people, and one of them hasn't seen it before, and the other person has. So it's kind of that kind of dynamic.
So that'll be a spoiler-free one.
Still slightly different.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So still slightly different to us, but sort of on a similar vein. And I think there was one more, and it slips my mind what it's called. But it's interesting that other people are picking it up, and I'm glad that The Wire is getting a sort of revolution in some sense. This HD release is definitely having an impact, and lots of people tuning in to find out what's going on and looking at The Wire a different perspective all this time on. Yeah,
no, that's great. That's really good news. And they announced just this week the release of the Blu-ray of the shows. They're also showing the packaging for it, which looks really nice. They've got a nice kind of gloomy artist rendition of the Baltimore skyline on the front. And it's going to cost $200 as an RRP, so it should be a nice investment when it eventually arrives sometime in summer this year. So we haven't got long to wait. I like that you describe it as an investment. It is. That you put the money in, but you sort of cash out on just great TV drama. You never finish cashing out. It just you just keep on watching and learning new things. So yeah. I just saw that it was announced this week, so it's worth keeping our eyes on that for when it comes out in summer.
Absolutely, yeah. So yeah, that was the emails we got this week. So thanks very much for dropping us a line.
Yeah.
Right, so you're giving us the recap this week, Toby.
Yep, it's my turn. Okay, so I managed to get a suitable number of sections. We kind of have our major strands that we're used to. We've got the Sobotka Detail, we've got the Greeks, we've got the Dock Business, we've got the Barksdales. We've also got our kind of Western shooting strand, which is just for this episode, unique storyline. So, broadly speaking, I guess this episode we see all our key institutions go through setbacks and then get back on their feet. That would be perhaps one way of kind of a brief overview of the episode, and then a few prominent new faces are introduced this week as well, which is exciting, and I'm sure we'll get to discussing those as we go through.
Yeah. But
to begin with, start where we left off last week with a real estate dispute breaking out in the West Side, the Western shooting. So, for the first section, Bodie Broadis's crew faced the repercussions of beating another crew of dealers to get them off of their turf when they come back with guns. In the ensuing gunfight, a young boy is killed by a stray bullet from his bedroom window. So there we have our introductory scene.
The first thing that we see is them passing off some of their poor product, and there's the guy in the truck saying that they had given it a different name. Now they're calling it WMD.
That's the introduction of the WMD branding, which becomes a mainstay in season 3, actually, isn't it?
Yeah, all the little brands kind of show up in various different places.
And we see
spider bags, yellow tops.
Yeah, that's true. The spider bags, I forgot about those. One of Justin's favourites. But and
there's the season 4 episode where they have the election special.
Oh yeah,
kind of nice to see this idea that the business on the street, they too have kind of seasonal sales and event sales.
And we see that this time round they're really having to use the most explosive of names to grab people's interest at this point. So, weapons of mass destruction in a bag. All for you, or same shit, different name.
Topical as well, if you consider when it was being filmed.
Yeah, it's right in the height of the Iraq stuff, the Iraq War, and David Simon has often said that the third season is an allegory for the steps that led to the Iraq War. So I think the WMD branding that's used throughout that is quite kind of symbolic of that move, and so I thought that was nice to see that, and it was also nice to see how, following on from what you were saying last week, Alex, about these ghetto districts becoming kind of normalised. It's nice to see that the scene shows us the way the business is having to change. So they've abandoned these low rises and tower complexes. And they're now working from the street corners where they're having to catch the passing trade. That they used to sit in these kind of communities of addicts, and they'd thrive and continually buy drugs, and it would also be harder for the police to catch them. But without that community there, having moved east towards Prop Joe's area, they're having to now, branch out and find that passing trade on the more vulnerable street corners. And this is how the drugs work for the rest of the show, particularly once those towers get demolished in a few episodes' time. So it's good to see that there's that transition being made. And they're now having to engage new tactics as well. Mainly, we see the increased security tactics with stashes hidden down alleyways. We see Poot acting as a lookout on one shift here. So I thought it was really nice to see that. And
they're all getting squeezed together.
Yeah.
Which is obviously creating a very palpable sense of confrontation, and obviously we get it here.
There's that tension in the air from the start.
Yeah, and once it comes to the actual firefight itself, they obviously get a tip off from their lookout, or just some kid who's riding by.
That's right.
What really struck me, I think, was how reckless a firefight it was. There wasn't really any sense of gun control, in the sense that there were trained shooters. They were just firing blindly and just shots going everywhere, and really kind of reckless firefight. This isn't sort of a bunch of seasoned fighters or soldiers or anything like that. You kind of really get that sense that it is just street gangs.
Yeah,
they don't really know exactly in kind of professional sense how to use a gun in that way. So it's quite it's very fast-paced fighting.
Yeah, possibly one of the most honestly amateurish action scenes in TV history or whatever. But not in the way it's filmed, but in the way these people go about their action. And it's kind of embarrassing that the only bullet that does hit is a stray round, unfortunately, in quite a tragic way. And I think that's how they really establish the tension as well, is when we join a completely new family whom we know nothing about. We understand that when a show does that, only something bad can be happening, really. It's kind of a way to create some innocent collateral damage. And that's exactly what happens here. So it's
literally just cut between the violence, isn't it?
Yeah.
This again, another one of these sort of these nice domestic moments intercut with terrible violence on the street. And what did you? I have a feeling this is probably intentional, but what do you feel about the mother's reaction? Because I think after someone would have heard a firefight out in the street, and you call up to your child and they don't respond first time, I think a mother would sort of immediately be concerned about that. But
yeah,
this mother seems like, oh, it's over now, just another firefight, right, let's go.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that's an intentional choice, but to me, I kind of felt, wouldn't a mother be more suddenly rushing up those stairs and finding out what's going on?
I think perhaps what they get going towards is that this occurrence is commonplace in this district. Yeah. And particularly when she says, oh, look, the drama's over, it's like, it's just another episode of drama. And all the previous times I'm used to you surviving this, and I'm going to have to come upstairs and see you in cold blood to believe that you've actually been shot this time. And unfortunately, it does happen, and she gives us a pretty piercing scream, to kind of show that. But yeah,
it even does the slightly sort of cliched sort of scream and retract, like where it sort of zooms out as they're crying. Like it doesn't feel too out of place here, though.
Yeah, it kind of, as you say, it kind of pans over the street, so the scream engulfs the whole street, which is it's quite a sensational way of doing it. But yeah, it kind of gets to the heart of the drama and the tragedy.
And that's one of the key themes in The Wire overall, is a desensitization to the environment, to violence, and to the kind of culture that comes with it. And I guess this is another demonstration of it. I'm like I say, I must admit, when I was watching it, I did kind of feel like, come on, it's obvious what's happening here. Like,
yeah,
you should be more concerned. You should be rushing up those stairs. That's kind of what you come to expect. But that's not what this is trying to show. This is trying to show a real desensitization to it. Yeah,
definitely. So overall, a pretty solid scene. And I think
very good introduction.
Not necessarily for the action sequence itself, but for what we learn about the Barksdales, and for the depiction of this commonplace violence in a domestic setting, I thought was really nice.
Well, that's The Wire all over, isn't it? Having these action scenes that it's not about the action, it's about what we learn through the action. Yeah,
definitely. Although it's odd because it's such an unmemorable action sequence. I think the most memorable one really is the field interviews at the start of season 1. That's the one that sticks in my mind the most. But it's an oddly forgettable one, particularly because there's not really any consequences to it apart from an unnamed character getting shot. So
let's move on to the next one.
Yeah. So our next chapter of the Western shooting is the aftermath. So Rules welcomes Major Howard Bunny Colvin and Lieutenant Dennis Mello to the scene of the shooting, representing the highest echelons of the Western District Command. Rules is angry that they are late, claiming that it used to be when a 9-year-old kid hit the pavement the district commander would be there within minutes, while Colvin explains that Burrell had taken him to DC with other district commanders to attend a seminar. Ed Norris is the lead investigator from Homicide. Rules asks Colvin to have Western and tactical arrest as many dealers as possible while his men work the case. Colvin's district then makes large-scale strike operations against drug dealers and numerous arrests. The SWAT team leader has tactical arrest everyone in the pit on suspicion of murdering the young child due to the drug trade associated in the projects. Mello comments that they waited too long to do this, and Colvin asks him what it is they are doing.
So this is the first appearance of Bunny Colvin, who is one of my favourite characters in the whole show. It's great to see him again. I kind of forgot about how he arrived, in a way.
Yeah.
And this is definitely a setup of Amsterdam. In season 3, Bunny Colvin has this big plan. He kind of wants to make that big change, and we see immediately in his character about how he feels and the disdain he has for the way they go about things. And Rules tells him that he should just get all these tactical teams out and bash some heads because he'll feel better afterwards. Not because it's a good idea, but because that's just what we do to vent off some steam. And the incredible thing is that the police actually go around and disturb the peace rather than keep it. We see people kind of stood around listening to music, just hanging around, whatever. It's not really made clear that they're doing anything wrong whatsoever, and there's no reason straight away why we should suspect that they are. But immediately the police come running in and pushing people against walls and disturbing the peace. And it's the very opposite of what they should be doing. And as Bunny Colvin asks, what exactly are they doing? What are they trying to achieve? Is it something related to the police, or is it just an emotional, egotistical thing that's brewed up because of this war on drugs, between the people and the police? Yeah,
definitely. And Colvin really voices his frustration and seems to be the only one who really thinks about things in those terms. And as you say, it's great that they're directly setting up this Amsterdam storyline. I think a problem that a lot of TV shows have is when a new season arrives, there's kind of this obligatory effort to introduce new characters as, consciously part of a new season. Whereas if they do what they do here with Colvin, they kind of give him that pre-introduction. He becomes part of the world beforehand. It makes that moment where he appears in season 3 all that much more natural. So I really like the fact that they're doing this. And I think something, if they did that with Cutty as well in the prison, I think it would have really, really benefited Cutty's character as well. But unfortunately, they didn't quite manage to work that one out. So yeah, it's good to see. And there's a couple of good character moments here as well, with Dennis Mello being the real Jay Landsman, quite famously.
Yeah.
So when Simon was on the homicide force doing his research, Jay Landsman, played by Delaney Williams, is that right, in the show, was... the real role was occupied by this guy here, Mr. Jay Landsman. So that's cool to see him taking a role. And we also see our SWAT guy, who has a kind of mini arc in the show. We saw him again during the arrest of Stringer, one of the SWAT guys outside the club. So
just appears a couple of times, doesn't he? Just pops up when there's a tactical team about, and he's there to be the familiar face in charge.
And he's there to be the funny guy this time around as well, with his "Don't just say no to drugs," which I quite enjoy. And he eventually gets promoted later on as well. We see him in a proper kind of uniform, doing a slightly more tactical job later on, which is good to see. So
yeah, even the smallest character can have an arc.
Yeah, that's what's so great.
And Mello also, as you mentioned before, is he kind of has the most authentic Baltimorean accent on the whole show.
Yeah.
Very hard to... I'm not even going to attempt to imitate that. It's a very unique accent.
Yeah, it's an odd accent, isn't it? It's this kind of mixture of the South and the North, just that meeting point. And I can't really do any Baltimorean. I know that you've got to say rude instead of road. That's about the only word that I can muster. So, anything else to say on the whole Colvin sections, or should we?
Not without wanting to talk about season 3. So
we'll have to save our breaths for that one.
Yeah, let's move on.
Okay, so this is Bodie's Aftermath. Bodie reports the gunfight to Stringer. Stringer is angry that their trade will be disrupted by the boy's death. Stringer tells Bodie that their business revolves around more than violence, territory and reputations, and that Bodie needs to show some flex, and intelligence also. Shamrock drives Bodie to dispose of the weapons. Bodie wipes them clean as they travel and throws them over the side of the Hanover Street Bridge near the harbour. The bag of guns lands on a passing boat, though, and is later picked up by city police.
And Stringer here gives the major Stringer lesson, I suppose, about his opinion on the business, which is, like you say, it's more than violence, it's more than what your reputation is. And Stringer has a very affirming conversation with Prop Joe later on about how you don't have to be someone who's feared, who's known on the street. You can be totally hidden, and it actually benefits your business. And that all of this egotism and all of this arrogance can actually be counterproductive, because in many cases it causes bodies. And that's what we've seen here. And we've seen before, as Stringer has mentioned before, it's the bodies that bring the police.
Yeah, so another fantastic episode for Stringer, where his transition of the Barksdales is kind of completing. And I really like the way that he refers to the the back set with this kid's death as a timeout, kind of completing that game metaphor, which is really nice, putting the operation on hold. And it really feels like Bodie has learned that last lesson that he needs, and it kind of represents how the Barksdale management has finally shifted from an Avon pride-based approach to Stringer's kind of business pragmatism-based approach, and Stringer's kind of come full circle with what he wanted to achieve almost.
Well, when the cat's away,
yeah,
and the cat is definitely away, and Stringer is taking full opportunity to instill his style into the organisation. It's starting to look more like the Bell organisation.
Yes, yeah, it's and what a style it is. I mean, it's not, it's against killing boys for no reason, as is Avon's, but it's motivated by profit rather than actual compassion for the kids. But at least it's not happening. So
it's interesting as well that Avon, hasn't really been kind of purposely been made not much use. I mean, he's supposedly trying to find some kind of connect whilst in prison, but he's not had any luck thus far. So it's kind of given Stringer all of that responsibility.
Yeah.
And like I say, he's taking advantage of it.
Definitely. And it was cool to see how there were 2 unlucky hits in the space of one day. First the bullet and the kid, and then the boat and the bag. Which you got to say, I mean, Bodie gets quite a telling off for this, quite a grilling, but he was pretty unlucky at the end of the day. I mean, I'm not sure I would have made the precaution of really getting out the car and, going right to the edge and waiting for the splash. So
it is. It's another slight kind of, I don't know, maybe a bit of a trope when characters do things to sort of throw things off bridges or themselves or whatever, and then there's like something underneath to catch them that they didn't know about. That's like a certain trope that does appear here. But I think you're right. I think they're probably just not even thinking about that. They're not going to like get out the car and check. And Stringer sees it from that kind of businessman perspective, where it's like perfectly logical and cold, and do everything really calculated, and don't make a single move until you're absolutely certain.
Yeah. But
when you're out in the field, as it were, and Stringer kind of isn't really, you don't have that same perspective on things.
Definitely, yeah.
So it makes perfect sense for him to do that, but there's every good reason why Bodie and the others weren't thinking about that.
Yeah, because I'd have thought getting out the car really draws more attention to yourself, particularly on that busy road bridge. It seems like the better option, really the more logical one. But I do like how dropping it into the harbour gives them a reason to drive near the docks, just so we kind of are reminded that everything's connected, and even the West Siders who have never left Baltimore can occasionally go and meddle with the dock workers, so it's kind of cool. And also that transition from the scene where the Barksdale's bag lands on the boat, the horn goes off, and then we see how close they are to the docks when you can hear the horn from Johnny's restaurant, or whatever it was. I think it's called Johnny's Diner, is it?
Yeah, it's a very nice touch. Yeah. Another sort of excellent use of audio to not only segue a scene, but to make the world complete.
Yeah. Okay. So we have our final Western shooting strand. So Jay Landsman discusses the case with Ray Cole and Ed Norris. They have had witnesses mention Bodie, street talk they call it. Norris and Cole later bring Bodie in, having recovered the guns he failed to adequately dispose of. They present him with the weapons. Cole tells him they have matched the prints to one of the weapons. Bodie asks which one, and Cole picks the wrong weapon. Knowing that he is in not as much trouble as they say he is, Bodie again asks for his lawyer.
A nice appearance from the real, not the real Jay Landsman, I mean, because he doesn't appear much at all in this season. I feel like we very rarely see him, but he has another little moment here where he's telling them that they should be... What is it? He says something about it. Why isn't he being thrown around in one of our...
Hold around with great abandon in one of our interrogations.
Yeah. So it's just another nice Landsman turn of phrase. And then that leads us into our nice little interrogation where Bodie seems quite a bit more seasoned towards what's going on. There's no intimidating him. And there's also quite a lot of ambiguity in that scene. Like, we don't know exactly whether or not Cole has picked the right gun. It's not made very obvious. It's only later on when Bodie says, and it wasn't even the right one. That's kind of the moment where I felt like it was confirmed. I didn't feel like it was being pointed to straight on in that scene.
Yeah, I felt like Bodie's face kind of gave onto it. it's just that kind of lawyer in a condescending tone, and he's established the high ground here. It kind of feels like that when he says it at the end. But I know what you mean. It's certainly left ambiguous. And Bodie being picked up from the street talk, I'm wondering how that works exactly. Because I guess they just go around and sort of do some canvassing perhaps, and occasionally you find a snitch or two, but yeah. Although I guess without really much of an Avon organisation there's not really that same dedication to loyalty. So perhaps Bodie's name really came up, just because no one's really got any allegiances anymore.
Yeah, it's not made particularly clear, but
yeah,
I guess it doesn't matter too much.
Yeah.
So what's our next section? That's the whole of the Western shootings covered, I think.
Yes, that's right. That's right, yeah. So the next one we're going to move on to is the Sobotka Detail. There's a few sections here. Firstly, let's jump into this one. The Detail are dismayed at the lack of activity from their subjects and realise that they must be changing their operation procedure. The team decide they need to track a new number for the target they just identified before the smuggling ring changed up. Daniels assigns Herc and Carver to watch that warehouse, while Freeman, Prez, Bunk and Bodie man the remaining wiretaps.
Isn't this where they hear Prop Joe on the wire?
That's right. Lazy boys. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember seeing this bit, and obviously they don't realise anything at the time, but it's just there, put out, and you kind of hear Prop Joe's voice.
Yeah, it's just kind of that
if only they knew.
Yeah, that dramatic irony where they just don't have any idea of how great the man is on the other end. That's pretty cool, definitely. And we see that it's not just the West Side that's taking a time out here. They're obviously making it clear that because of Frank's well-aimed paranoia last episode, not only Sobotka himself, but the Greeks and Prop Joe, they're all changing up their patterns and abandoning phones. So he's had quite an effect on the criminal underworld here. And
another reinforcement of everything being connected.
Yeah.
Not just sort of geographically and characters interacting with other characters, but also when something happens in one place, it affects everywhere, and all of the organisations have to retreat somewhat to safer ground in order to re-establish themselves, make sure they know exactly what's going on, who's watching them, and try and get back to business.
Definitely. And it's nice to see that the police are really on top of things, and it's very clear to them that no one is sure of the police surveillance. They haven't been too heavy-handed with it. Otherwise, they would have abandoned the warehouse completely, as Freeman says. But it's just a waiting game now, and I love how Daniels kind of puts the full stop on that with the, well, I, for one, am a patient motherfucker. It just seems very distinguished, and a nice way to kind of push the detail into the next chapter of investigation. So. And
you believe it when he says it as well.
Yeah, it's great. It's a real
There's
spark
no doubt
in his
that
eye.
they could outweight them.
Yeah. So there's not a hell of a lot to discuss with that bit.
Yeah, it's just sort of rejoining the detail and them getting into their next phase of work, I guess.
It's kind of a check-up, yeah. So the next, Jimmy obviously has quite a lot to do this episode, so I'll sort of hover over him. So Jimmy McNulty continues to try to infiltrate the Greeks' brothel, and has more success when taking Freeman's advice to pose as a client from outside of America. He uses a badly faked English accent and manages to book a visit. So this strand is going to include all of the brothel-based things, including the undercover operation itself, which of course starts with McNulty training his accent up, with a few crikeys and hanky-pankies and blokes, for good measure.
I thought it was interesting that Freeman said, he's like, do you do any accents, English, British, Scottish?
Yeah.
Well, English and Scottish are British, and there isn't really a British accent.
Yeah.
So
English, British,
that was
Scottish.
an unusual thing to say.
Yeah,
I wonder if that was what was in the script.
It's true. Then again, it's kind of a stereotype over here that Americans don't really know the difference between England and Britain. So
yeah, maybe that's the joke.
Yeah.
And I think we mentioned James Cromwell as well.
Yes, that's right. With another rule of three here with Knightsbridge, Stepney and Mersey. So
Yeah.
as a Brit, I was trying to work out why those place names were chosen. Were they significant at all? And so we have Knightsbridge, one of the wealthiest parts of London to the west of the city. Stepney, kind of historically working class district in the east of London. And then we have Mersey, which is a region in the northwest, named after the river and centred on the city of Liverpool.
Which is where I live.
Yeah, which is where Alex is based. And a city that was built on its docks, on its docking industry. So, and it was also one of the most important trading ports with Baltimore during the times of the British Empire. The Liverpool to Baltimore trade route was one of the busiest. So I was wondering, it's a very, very tenuous link, I'm sure, but as
and Liverpool has a kind of somewhat similar story, and I'm not going to pretend that it's anywhere quite as on the same scale, but it's a similar kind of story where when the docks went very much out of business, it did leave an awful lot of people on the street because all of those industrial jobs had suddenly disappeared.
Yeah.
And even today, Liverpool is still kind of suffers to some extent. It's one of the poorest councils in the UK. It's got one of the highest unemployment rates in the UK. It's a wonderful, wonderful city, and I love it. And there's so many great things to say about it. But it definitely has those kind of problems that followed on from the economic decline around that era.
Absolutely.
And obviously that's again what we see with Baltimore. So there's a sort of similar. There's definitely a relation there, I think.
Yeah, it's the quintessential Rust Belt of the UK. I mean, we don't use that term in the UK, but it's the same effect as you were talking about. And Liverpool really saw that big population decline that Baltimore did. Peaking 1 million in the 30s and 40s down to less than 500,000 now. So it's really, really lost a huge chunk of its population like Baltimore did. So it's nice to see that link potentially being acknowledged. I certainly stand corrected if someone wants to say that it's quite a minor element of the show, but it's cool.
Good detective work nonetheless.
Yeah, and I thought it was nice to see Knightsbridge and Stepney, the west and east, and they're kind of two very different districts of London in terms of wealth, and that may well refer to the west and east divide in Baltimore as well.
Well, everything's connected,
yeah.
So in this it connects London and Liverpool, so it connects you and me.
Whoa. Better step back there a second. Was that scene from the start, do you reckon? Did they know we'd be in this very moment right here?
Oh, well, you never know who's listening. Somebody could be listening to this podcast right now. Or at least I hope so.
That would have to be a bit of an intruder.
Yeah.
Not that I mind that.
So yeah, that's McNulty's turning into being a British person playing an American person pretending to be a British person.
Yes, which is a very well nailed accent. I thought it was very well done. It's exactly kind of how
David Simon's idea of a joke, clearly.
Yeah, it works. And the transition wasn't complete without a big ass man's camera bag / purse / something that certainly was a bit of an unnecessary.
All the Europeans have them, apparently.
Yeah, I guess it. Reinforces.
I think the Europeans might disagree over whether or not that includes English people.
It's the sort of thing that you might look up on Google, isn't it? And then just see this kind
controversial.
This sort of antiquated article that doesn't really. But yeah, it was weird. But I guess it reinforces the lie that he's come from far away, where things are different and people carry big bags. So
yeah,
he's less likely to be some copper.
Makes him seem more like an outsider, and it's like what. I forget exactly who's saying. Is it Freeman that says it to him? Where they talk about if you're going to say that you're from somewhere, say that you're from further out of town. The further out of town, the better.
Yeah. It was nice that Freeman had the kind of know-how to kind of word his way through a conversation with a madame, and McNulty was certainly caught out there. Although he didn't do too well on that phone call, was he? He was caught out by the intensity of her interrogation.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not going to tell you that.
A lot of very serious questioning going on there.
Yeah,
I think McNulty just expected someone to just give him an address, and that was it.
Christ, I'm just a guy looking to get laid, right?
Yeah, grabbing sex might make that make that kind of sense to McNulty, who is used to his one night stands and everything, as we know. But when he faces a barrier like that, he doesn't seem to know what to do. He's not used to being interrogated in that way by any of the actual women that he's genuinely trying to get with. So
yeah,
he just wants to be able to take it as he pleases.
And that's it's another thing that's great about these police investigations is that at every step they always try to layer it with red tape or with difficulties, so nothing really feels easy. It feels like they really have to work at everything. So it's nice to see that they layer those things on.
Yeah.
And we also get his language lesson with "spot on," which is an accuracy. That's certainly a very British phrase, which eventually kind of turns into "spot on it," spot on it, which I quite enjoyed at the end there.
So the next section.
No, we've got to continue with Jimmy's ascent into the brothel. It's part of this section as well. So.
Oh, I see. Oh, you sort of broke mid-section.
I sort of I let us describe it in our discussion rather than have the manuscript do the job for us. So
right.
It starts out with.
So what is next then?
It's the brothel, right? So it's the bit where
take us through it.
So McNulty picks two. Attaboy, says Bunk, and McNulty's then taken in. Picks his two. And I guess the detail assemble and get ready to smash in with a big baton or whatever, battering ram, I guess they're called. And it was great to see Officer Walker have his debut appearance as the battering ram officer, who becomes that arsehole cop in season 4 who kind of torments the kids and breaks Donut's fingers. So it's nice to see him set up from the start as a bit of a...
And takes Bubbles' DVDs.
That's right, yeah. I mean, he's an absolute piece of shit. So it's not again a nice seeing another character set up very early this time. Actually, we don't see him for another couple of seasons.
It's good that kind of what he was doing was suitable for his character as well. He was the guy who was going to break the door in.
Yeah,
exactly. That sort of brute force method. But the detail know that they don't need to do that. You can't, what you're going to do with a prostitute once you've got them in a room, you can't flush them down the toilet like you can with drugs, like they say.
Another great Bunk line. Like, he's just full of these great one-liners.
Yeah. And it's true, and they knock on the door and in they go. There's not a lot that can be done.
Yeah, even with Bunk explaining very clearly what it is they're about to do when the door opens. We're going to lock your asses up.
Yeah. It's interesting as well, we see the madam kind of giving a nod to one of the other girls. Or, no, sorry, she shakes her head, and possibly to indicate that they had some kind of plan if they thought that they could get out of it by force, perhaps. I don't know.
Yeah.
But she just kind of seems to make a move that suggests whatever it is that you have planned, don't bother, it's over, sort of thing.
Oh, okay, so they may have had a backup procedure for these moments.
Yeah, it's kind of hinted at by this sort of silent exchange. It's a very minor moment, but...
Okay, yeah, that's a good spot. That's very subtle, too subtle for my eyes. So nicely done.
Cheers.
And of course, Jimmy very predictably ends up with his penis in vagina. And then Rhonda later on reads over McNulty's attempt at swerving the perjury he's committed by doing this act. So, which is a very funny scene to watch as well.
Yeah, her expression as she looks over him is just... It's a face of horror that doesn't seem to end. Even as she walks away, there's still some disgust on her face.
So, overall, a very funny scene.
Yeah. Definitely a very kind of entertaining, fun to watch it unfold.
Yeah.
And I guess there's a certain feel like it's a slight detachment, I suppose, for all of the seriousness of what they're trying to achieve here. It is a bit of light relief, I suppose.
Yeah, but completely earned. Like they've spent a long time building up to this brothel raid, so it doesn't feel like a kind of cheap moment of comic relief. It really feels like a nice product of something. So yeah. We'll move on from this now onto the FBI stuff. So McNulty visits Fitz for the first time in a long time, apologises for his actions last time they met. Fitz helps him to look up Double G. Fitz finds that Gleekus' file has been sealed by an agent, Kutris. Kutris tells Fitz that there is little to the file they are holding. Once the call is finished, Kutris phones Spiros to let him know other agents are looking into Gleekus.
And once again, we're brought back to the wealth divide of the police, or the city police, and the FBI. and they're talking about all the technology that they have, and there's one thing in particular where McNulty's talking about if he wants to get hold of that kind of information, he has to sort of go through all these people, whereas Fitz just kind of puts in a USB stick and does a little search on his computer, and he's got all that information at his fingertips.
Yeah.
These kind of great caverns of difference between the two worlds, and this seems like a revisit to season 1, where that was covered quite a lot between Fitzhugh and McNulty.
Definitely.
We get a little reinforcement of it here. So it seems that Fitz he's been demoted in some way, hasn't he?
Oh right, okay. Maybe
it's kind of maybe I'm imagining that, but I kind of feel like they were talking about the fact that after McNulty came in and sort of pissed everyone off, maybe Fitzhugh got some of the rap from that, or something happened. But it seemed like he had been demoted in some way. That was the impression that I got.
Okay.
Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know.
That would make sense. Like his commitment to the drug trade that they didn't want anymore, gets him canned. That would be a nice kind of way to demonstrate.
It's just that we see him here in a position that we haven't seen him before. He's kind of sat at the desk, and he seems a bit more, I don't know, lower tier kind of office worker. It doesn't seem like he has that kind of more sophisticated agent status that we saw from before.
Yeah,
the fact that he's kind of changed clothes, and maybe I'm like completely missing this, but that was the feeling that I got from it.
No, it's definitely fair. I really, for as nice as that office is, I really don't like the kind of partitioned office desks. They're really kind of horrible and overbearing to work around. But yeah, perhaps that's what Fitzhugh's having to deal with. And it's odd how he really hasn't taken McNulty's dig personally at all. Particularly if it did get him demoted, as you might be hinting at. So
yeah,
you can just completely shrug that off as nothing, and jump straight into these white boys that Daniels wants to be run through the FBI computer.
They must be very good friends, because Fitz helps McNulty on multiple occasions, and it's not really clear what McNulty does for him.
Yeah.
So we can only assume that they have a very good connection one way or another.
Yeah, maybe kind of old college friends or something. They never really go over it, do they? I assume that Fitz used to be in the BPD because they said, was it some sort of reference to patrol later on? Maybe, I don't know, but that could well be it. And we also get the very ominous introduction of Kutris, where the camera really lingers on his steely face for a good few seconds, just so we know that this guy kind of is up to no good. And we see that he's based in San Diego, where Valchek's truck also ended up.
Yeah.
Another weird geographical connection. And despite the world getting smaller through telecommunication, as the Greek tells us, Kutris ends up a few minutes later in Baltimore, having flown across the entirety of the country to go and meet him and tell him about the FBI and what they're doing. And they meet in a park between a powerful lion statue.
Yeah, there's a great reveal that the Greeks' operation goes even further, like say in the vein of the world being a smaller place, I suppose, and that they have a connection inside the FBI itself.
Yeah. That connection, the nature of it, I'm not too sure on. I really don't feel like the show explains itself properly.
Yeah, that is true. It is just kind of introduced and not really, because there's obviously no establishment of it. It's just like, oh yeah, they know this guy and he's in the FBI. And for one reason or another, I can only assume money, because that's what the Greeks have plenty of. He's there to help them out with information and let them know when they're... And that's what they do, isn't it? The Greeks kind of tell him about these Colombians and bust them.
Yeah.
And in exchange, they get from him information about people who are looking for them.
Yeah. Well, I assume the Colombians was a problem the Greeks had personally. And what Kutris gets out of it is that he gets fed terrorism targets, or terrorism targets that they invent. And in this case, they blamed the terrorism on the Colombians, which also solved their problem.
Not only that, but finding the amount that he does, and obviously there's all those barrels and everything. It's clearly a big pull for him. It's going to look great. Like he's going to be a sort of hero.
It's kind of mounting him. So it's kind of ambiguous as to whether he's a corrupt FBI officer or not. If his mandate is anti-terrorism, then he's kind of fulfilling that mandate. So it's.
But
it's
he is
kind
also dealing with international drug smugglers, so that's a bit of a swing in the other direction.
Definitely, but if drug smuggling is low on the agenda and cooperating with these guys gets me terrorism targets, then what's the big problem? So it's still not explained properly. That's still kind of conjecture at the end of the day. I don't really know what the relationship is, and they never explain it.
Well, the Greek mentions, like what you were saying, he says, I hear they're all terrorists down there now.
Mm.
So, alluding to that terrorist information that they can get him. And I agree. I think it's probably just because drugs are far down the agenda. So even if that were to get slightly mentioned or discovered in some way, people probably wouldn't do anything about it. Terrorism is what gets the media and gets the stats and gets the brass kind of interested. So
yeah,
no reason to stir that up if it means keeping their stats and everything happy.
And it looks like the Greeks literally planted one of their processed drug trucks in as one of the Colombian shipments, because that's the same van that I think Nicky and Ziggy collect their first payment from when they when they gather the chemicals for Spiros. I think that they've just planted the processed drugs in there, maybe the paint pigments. But again, that's kind of me making the best of a very ambiguous bunch of scenes, because I think this is perhaps the most ambiguous The Wire ever is. This whole Kutris stuff. So. Yeah, that's kind of my take on it anyway. Yeah,
it is a slightly disjointed segment of the episode. I do agree. It feels, less established.
Yeah.
There's a lot left to the imagination, I think.
Yeah. Okay.
So what's next?
So we have a final Sobotka Detail strand. So at the office, Freeman notices a container going missing and asks Carver to watch what happens with it, as he is already out on surveillance at the Greek's warehouse. Carver reports the truck's arrival, while Eton orders one of his men to check the number plates of cars near the warehouse to check if the police are nearby. With all the team having gathered a significant collection of evidence, Daniels and Perlman meet with Burrell, Rules and Valchek for a progress check.
Yeah, there's quite a lot of things there, because that leads into that meeting, there's quite a lot to say about. But I'll start off with Herc and Carver, who don't feel like they're particularly respected as frontline investigators. And I thought it was nice that Carver said, "Don't waste film," to Herc, which feels like one of the key philosophies of making The Wire. Like, not a single moment on film is wasted. There's something in shot that's relevant to the plot and relevant to drawing things forward.
Ah, very nice.
Which I thought was a sort of it felt a little bit prophetic in that sense. Like,
yeah, don't
waste film.
Oh, beautiful, yeah. Nice catch. And I guess in terms of the narrative of the show, this strand for Herc and Carver is all about their mounting frustration with their lackey roles. And we're still, Carver particularly still got some drive to do his work, and he collects a nice few photographs here and really helps the team out. But Herc particularly is really feeling a little bit of a spare part. And we'll see that kind of eventually leads the detail off into a different direction at the end of the season. But it's nice to see that, and it's good to see Eton trying to take all the precautions he can by getting his henchmen to go and take down all the license plates of nearby cars. And despite the fact there's a big abandoned building across the road, which is prime police stomping ground. And we see that after 3 days of surveillance, they finally move the clean can back, and business resumes.
Yeah, the Greek especially very anxious to get things moving again.
Yeah.
And I guess this moves into the scene with Valchek, Burrell and Daniels, Perlman.
Yep.
Kind of that great office scene, which is fantastic. I mean, we see here Valchek has completely been left behind by the whole process. And he completely ignores all of the work that the Detail have done. They've done all of this great work to get hold of this information. They've managed to get into a position where they, much closer to solve 14 Jane Doe murders. And he just does not care one bit. It's just still all about that ego and about sort of fulfilling this vendetta that he's got with Frank Sobotka. And it ties in quite nicely to what Stringer was saying, that it's not about your reputation. It's not about sort of busting heads and getting back on these these rivalries.
Yeah.
Because that's just counterproductive.
Yep.
And we're seeing it here in the police as much as we are on the street.
Yep, absolutely. And we'll see that again in some of Spiros' discussions. So it's a nice three-way tie between the institutions. But yeah, as you say, it's Valchek really proves himself here to be among the show's most immature characters. And when he storms off at the end, calling everyone a bunch of fucking rat fuckers, yeah, it's unbelievably stupid and kind of hilarious. So
it's just like a child in that scene.
Yeah, definitely.
It's interesting as well that Burrell urges him to be patient.
Yeah,
because Burrell has been here before. He's been in this situation where he's given a detail, to Daniels, and it's just gone off in a completely different direction that they first anticipated.
Yeah.
Burrell's still going to get what he wants, but he also knows slightly better how to deal with it.
Yeah. And we now see a slightly different power relationship now that Burrell has moved up stairs.
Yeah.
I think Valchek mentioning it is the first time it's confirmed in the show that Burrell is now the commissioner. So he's replaced Warren Frazier, that slightly racist guy from season 1, as the new commissioner. And that also means that, Valchek no longer has much leverage over Burrell. And all he can say to Burrell now is, "You promised me Irv," and Irv kind of puts him in his place, and he storms off. So,
yeah, and Burrell is right. He gave Valchek everything he asked for. He didn't agree to make the case go the way that he wanted. Valchek just wanted the resources to start the detail.
Yeah,
and that's what he got.
Yep, there's no argument with that. Okay, so great scene. We'll now move on to the Greeks. There's a couple of strands with the Greeks. So Nick meets with Vondas to discuss the business. Vondas puts Nick in touch with White Mike McArdle to supply him with his drugs from now on. Vondas gives Nick a new list of clean containers to disappear. So there we go. That's our first part of the Greek strand.
So yeah, our short scene, Nick, as comfortable as ever dealing with the Greeks, and him and Vondas almost seem to have a sort of strange friendship to some extent, I dare to say. Yeah,
I found it really endearing. Seeing Spiros admit that Nick is small time, but that he's willing to help him out, kind of a friend in need, with a discount rate, wholesale for 3,000. Not bad at all.
Yeah.
So I found that really, really kind of a nice scene, really heartwarming.
And we see that what a small place it is indeed. That Nick and Vondas both know White Mike.
Yeah. And we see that White Mike is actually one of the key distributors for the Greeks operation.
Yeah.
I think that the majority of their stuff gets shipped off to Prop Joe, but locally speaking, it looks like White Mike is their main man. So it's good to see that links there as well. It's kind of worrying to hear that they're only going to disappear 3 more clean containers before resuming their business, which is what Spiros says to Nick. And with what we know about the detail, and following what Daniels set up with that patient motherfucker line, we know very much that they're far more patient than that, and that they're going to need to take a lot more time out if they're really going to succeed with their resumed business. Yeah,
again, for all of their smarts and all of their wisdom that they have between them, the Greeks, and it's, they're not entirely clued into how the operation works and how long they're likely to be watching. It seems that Stringer, for example, has a much better idea of how long it will be before they can resume normal operation when they drop a body like that.
Yeah.
Whereas the Greeks, although they are smart enough to sort themselves out a little bit and start sending out these clean cans, and we can see that they can afford to do that to a much greater extent than someone like the Barksdales, they're also more antsy to get back into business.
Yeah. And you get the sense that these guys have never been picked up by the police, whereas the Barksdales obviously have a lot of experience with things like that.
There's a lot of talk of prison and kind of the philosophy towards it, and that's a whole element of the life that the Barksdale organisation members have. But the Greeks never even mention it. It's not even a possibility. No. They don't consider going to prison. Why should they, sort of thing?
Exactly, and it seems like the Greeks dismiss the police as unintelligent, whereas the Barksdales seem to know better. They have this. They have a whole kind of mandate for how to deal with an interrogation. You give a different name, because you know your own name ain't no good, sort of things like that really set the two institutions apart, as you say, and draw the lines, their different skills quite nicely. But I was just kind of struck by how much I didn't want these guys to get caught. They were talking about disappearing only 3 more cans, and I was like, no, more. Like, it really shows you how much on both sides of the law you really get to care about these characters quite deeply, and I couldn't really decide which group I wanted to succeed. Yeah. So it was nice to kind of have that torn feelings, and yeah, so it was nice to see that.
And next up with the Greeks.
Yep. So Vondas discusses the smuggling business with Eton, and they agree to move more drugs. Later, the Greek has dinner with Vondas, Eton, and Ilona, the madam from the brothel. And
Gleekas is there, isn't he?
Yes, I think he may well be. That's a good catch, yeah.
So yeah, we have a very unique insider look to the business dealings of the Greek. Not just in the cafe. This is when they're doing their real business talk, I suppose. I don't think we see another scene really like this, do we?
No, it's good.
It's very candid. It's nice.
It's yeah, it's kind of actually fairly subtle what they discuss. It almost feels like we are an outsider as well. We're not really part of this circle, so we don't really understand what's being said. The only kind of real thing of substance that's mentioned is the Greek saying the world is a smaller place now, and the FBI cares very much about such a thing. And I don't really know what they mean by that, but they're clearly something to do with terrorism and FBI and the rest of it. So I thought that was quite a nice cryptic scene. And this scene kind of flies in the face of the other celebration scene that we see later on with Frank and Horse and Ott, where they physically stop themselves from drinking champagne. Whereas here we see them actually toasting each other with the champagne glasses. So I thought that was...
Yeah, that's good. Nice.
That was quite nice to see.
I thought that the champagne with Frank and the others was somehow a sort of allusion towards turning away from being what they call champagne socialists.
Yeah.
I thought it was kind of like a turning away from that as well. Yeah,
definitely. Working class loyalty. Got to keep it strong. So there was also the scene with Eton, which was a short scene, but a scene that I really liked, where Spiros says, "The Greek won't be angry; he'll be smart."
Yeah.
And that, it kind of cements exactly the way these guys do business. Remove all emotion and sense of profile from it. Just become a pragmatism machine. Don't worry about what's going on around you, and always look for the next way to maintain or increase the profit. And the way Spiros and the Greek understand business like this serves as a perfect role model, really, for the Barksdale organisation, or the way that Stringer wants the Barksdale organisation to go in. So it was nice to see that kind of synergy there between the institutions.
It's interesting as well that, as Prop Joe suggests later on, that lack of reputation and lack of arrogance and, like you say, concentration on pragmatism, that can help you stay undercover, and you don't get caught and you don't get heard about. But when the Greeks start getting involved with people like the Sobotkas, who do have those kind of more emotive, more reputation-based actions, that's when they start to become vulnerable.
Yep.
Because we can only assume that they've been operating for years and years and years without having been caught yet.
Definitely, yeah. So it's kind of numbed them to the actual reality of the police.
So now, like those new sort of people coming into their organisation, maybe having an impact on its vulnerability to the police, because it's increasing their reputation. They may have otherwise been unheard of.
Yep, definitely. Yeah. So let's. I think the thing I like about this as well is there are 3 scenes back to back, I think, following the dinner scene, where first the Greeks, then the police, and then the Barksdales, they all, quote unquote, go live again. They kind of overcome their setback and start doing business again. And following what has felt like very brief timeouts, and I think it's nice that the theme cemented even further with Ziggy finding some ambition again, as we'll get to in a bit. But it was nice to see those 3 kind of go back to back.
Yeah.
Right. Oh, this also includes the... we forgot to mention the exchange between Nick and White Mike, so we can also mention that.
Yes, and this also includes the bit where Sergei basically kind of puts himself into jail.
Yeah, it was pretty silly, wasn't it?
It's interesting that he calls White Mike, that he calls him an idiot, considering what he's just done, saying on the phone about the hands and the face missing. Like,
yeah.
He really does put himself into jail with that, and he's talking over a mobile. They don't have the same kind of discipline over the phone that we see that the Barksdale, for example, do. So,
and this is like a few minutes after he's instructed his men to go back live. Like, at the moment, they're still very wary of police surveillance. This is the worst time you can possibly speak on the phone about anything vaguely business related.
And he seems very relaxed about the whole thing.
Yeah, it's really weird. And it feels like the actual line at the end about the hands and face is a good line, and it perhaps feels like that kind of sensational line is there to distract us from the lack of logic here, which really is quite present. So it's quite cool to see that.
Yeah.
And it's made all the more stupid when we see that Koutris comes all the way to Baltimore to discuss business. He's talking about much less incriminating things, but he decides to come across the whole country to chat with the Greek about them just in case. Although, having said that, he did come also to make a bit of a grandstanding in the Baltimore docks, so perhaps that's not so valid, but...
Not a wasted journey, that's for sure.
No, true. I think the only thing left to say is that it was nice to see that, quite like Nick saying thanks for being straight on this when he gives him the discounted product. I think it's the only business where that line really applies. It's pretty much pointing out how rare an honest sale is in this business, and this is one of the first that he's come across. So,
and about as straight can be in that business, anyway.
Yeah. So, okay, let's move on to the dock business.
Okay.
So Ziggy drinks with Johnny 50 and expresses a desire to get out of the drug business, despite having been involved for over a year. Nick arrives later, and Ziggy, very drunk and distraught, tries to start a fight with him. Nick refuses to rise to Ziggy, then finds out in the bar why Ziggy was so upset. He had accidentally killed his pet duck. He gave the duck hard liquor, and it died of alcohol poisoning.
Yeah, I mentioned this briefly in the last episode, didn't I?
Yeah.
He ends up killing his duck with drink. And again, I'm still surprised that a duck would even get to that point. I would have thought that it would have found a distaste for alcohol quite quickly, but I guess not.
No, very, very strange. But it does seem to... Ziggy does seem to kind of rise up and find some ambition here. He spent the last episode kind of wallowing in his lack of purpose. But the way he kind of arranges this caper, I think it's quite well done, and he shows a lot of enterprising skill that we'll come on to. But I guess as far as the bar scene goes, we saw New Charles come back with a peg leg, or a prosthetic leg, which, again, it's quite an unusual thing to have in a show, but the prosthetic legs crop up again as an important plot point in Season 5 with this kind of Iraq war vet, which just kind of made me think of that. It's a strange kind of connection.
Oh, yeah. And it's not without that... sort of quite funny scene in outside the bar where Ziggy sort of just mindlessly tries to start a fight with Nick, and again we see another sort of very pathetic sort of slapping at someone that Ziggy obviously takes for trying to hit someone.
Yeah.
I mean, I know he's very drunk at the time.
Yeah, Nick's a big guy though. Like he's an awful lot bigger than Ziggy.
Yeah.
So.
Well, Ziggy likes to pick fights with people who are much bigger than him. It seems.
True that.
I guess there are not many people that are quite the same.
Yeah. It was nice to see Ziggy being acknowledged for the first time by the stevedores as well. I think Ziggy's name suggestion of Till was the one that was chosen by New Charles. That's his new nickname. So that gives him some recognition.
It's nice to have a little fly-on-the-wall look at the picking of a nickname in an otherwise quite closed community.
Yeah.
I mean, when you came into that and you hear all these nicknames, you'd have no idea. But here we see the birth of one and the reasoning behind it.
Yeah, it's great. It's almost like that they kind of said it's time for an update of your nickname. Formally speaking, it's time to find something new.
And picking with nicknames, it's always a case of you had to be there, and on this occasion we are there, so it's kind of nice.
Yeah, that's true. We only heard about Johnny 50's 50 beers from hearsay.
Yeah, very little evidence.
Yeah.
Well, it was 53, wasn't it? But they just rounded it to 50 because that sounded better.
Poetical. Yeah. Okay. Cool.
And then presumably the next bit is Ziggy with Glikas.
Yeah, Ziggy meets with Glikas and offers him stolen cars from the docks to sell abroad. Glikas is initially reluctant but agrees to give Ziggy a chance. Ziggy plans to create a track across the grass and a hole in the fence to take the cars through. Johnny 50 questions why they need to when they could take the cars out of the front. And Ziggy, of course, knows that... doesn't know, but he certainly believes that if they don't break the fence down, they'll assume it's an inside job from the docks and they'll start looking at the stevedores. So Ziggy's clearly a few steps ahead and does have some brain cells, which is nice to see. And I really like the way that he deals with Glikas as well. It's very enterprising, and he really kind of almost outsells Glikas at his own game. Yeah,
we see that he's got quite a lot of ambition here and has a certain salesman technique. I'm not sure it's for everybody, but it seems to work with Glikas here. And it's quite impressive that he convinces him that he's going to, get him cars, because it's not like Ziggy has done anything on that level before, as far as Glikas knows, and I can't imagine he sees him as being a big-time car thief. So he's obviously got a very convincing technique to get this deal done.
Yeah.
All he has to do now is get the cars.
That's tricky.
But like you say, he shows quite a few smarts here, and he has a bit of a resurgence after, like you say, much of his moping and sitting around.
Yeah, and I like the line: "The world would come to an end if a guy like you didn't know what to do with a couple of extra Mercedes." I thought that was kind of the winner at that point, and Glikas was overturned by it.
And I'm guessing this also includes the bit where he goes to the pawn shop and he pawns off the ducks.
Yes, yeah, that's right.
Necklace part, and takes a look at buying that gun that we know that he comes to use later on.
Oh yeah, of course.
So I guess you could say that if the duck hadn't been killed, then he wouldn't have pawned off the necklace. Thus, wouldn't have necessarily bought the gun. Thus, wouldn't have necessarily gone on to do what he goes to do later on. With his little shooting spree.
There's quite a set of steps there. I can't say anything against that. It's certainly true. So it's buying the duck that was the source of Glikas' death, was it?
Yeah.
Ouch. What an innocent little act.
What a way to go.
Yeah.
Does the duck ever have a name? Wasn't because Princess is his car.
That's true. It may.
I wasn't wondering if he ever gave a name to the duck.
He may well have done. I'm not sure.
I feel like I'm just forgetting it.
Yeah. Princess does ring a bell. Maybe he did. Maybe
that's the name of his car.
Yeah,
though.
but his car's no more. Maybe he replaced Princess with the duck.
Transfers the name.
Yeah. New nickname time.
Not much of a method of transport, duck.
Yeah. With a necklace like that for $1,200, it's princess worthy.
Yeah.
We have the Barksdale trade stuff. So Stringer meeting.
Oh yes, of course. Yeah.
Stringer meeting with Prop Joe to discuss cooperating over sharing product and territory. Prop Joe is worried that Avon might not be so keen to share his territory. Stringer suggests that when Avon sees how much money his organisation will make from cooperating with Joe's, he'll come round, but sounds far from convinced. So Stringer asks Brianna to talk to Avon about the deal he's made with Prop Joe. He says that with their weak product and lack of muscle, they're out of options. Brianna soon reports back that Avon is still adamantly against cooperating with Prop Joe. Avon told Brianna to assure Stringer that he's working on getting a new supply and is bringing in muscle from New York, named Brother Mouzone, to help fight off rival dealers. Disturbed, Stringer takes this news to Prop Joe, who's even more concerned. Stringer assures Joe that their deal is still on, but insists that they work together to deal with Brother. Joe refuses to send any of his people up against Brother, realizing his reputation as a feared hitman.
So lots of stuff there. Beginning with this great scene with Stringer and Prop Joe imparting an awful lot of wisdom about the gangster with no reputation,
Charlie Salas.
Yeah, and how they're all these great dealers, made a lot of money, and were never caught, never heard about, and that the police don't really know either.
Yeah, it's a great story. Really demonstrates the point well. I just love the way that Prop Joe tells these stories. He just has such a fantastic patter, and just the kind of that finger that pops up and says, "I know you don't," and the police don't have a clue either. And it's just a fantastic. I just love Prop Joe. I'm sorry, I'm just kind of.
Prop Joe is amazing. And we see that he knows, he clearly knows Avon well enough to know that Avon's not going to be up for it.
Yeah.
And sure enough, he isn't. Avon is still clinging on to that old idea. But whether he likes it or not, I think that if we carry on with Avon's way, like I mentioned in the last episode, there isn't going to be a Barksdale organisation for much longer. Because the truth is that they're not going to be able to keep repackaging the bad product that they've got over and over.
Yeah.
And Prop Joe senses this from Stringer, obviously sees the business deal there, but is also amiable enough to put a warning towards Stringer, who is being very audacious.
Definitely, yeah. So it's cool to see that, and Prop Joe really does just cement how illogical it is to hold on to this pride when the end goal is money. And we see here that, as you say, Avon's holding on to this pride, and it's pointless. The Barksdale is never going to be what it was, and if they don't go into this co-op, the Barksdale will end up as nothing, and at least they'll end up with, as something if they go into it. And Stringer sees the logic here. So I thought it was cool that he gave away D'Angelo's tower, the 221, to Prop Joe, and kept 3 others for himself. And
Stringer, bit too cowardly to go and ask Avon himself.
Yeah.
Gets Brianna to go and do it.
That's true, yeah.
Which is quite telling, really. I mean, he's emboldened enough to take all these steps, but now it's got to the point where he's actually not able to face him, and I don't think we've had a moment like that with him before. I mean, like I mentioned in an earlier episode, the relationship between Stringer and Avon, it sort of boils very slowly under the surface and builds up. But this is quite a moment, really, when you think about it. This is the first time we've seen that he's actually not able to face him with a decision that he wants to make. And Brianna is going to be the messenger. Yeah.
Although, do you not feel that perhaps it was a kind of logical decision based on that Brianna has more of an emotional element to her because they're closer, they're blood relatives, and I imagine whenever he sees Brianna, he sees D'Angelo as well. So it's going to pull on the heartstrings more, and possibly win him over more than Stringer is able to.
Yeah, that's definitely true. I mean, he knows that Brianna is going to provide a more convincing approach.
Yeah.
But I guess you could say that if he believed that strongly in the idea, that he could sell it to Avon, and he clearly doesn't feel confident enough to do that. So
yeah, it's certainly an element of hiding to it, as you say. Yeah. It's scary where the relationship's going.
Yeah. And then this leads on to the fact that Stringer is Avon, is bringing in Brother Mouzone.
Yeah.
The first mention of the I suppose the yin to Omar's yang.
Yes.
Sort of second real sort of larger than life character that there is in The Wire. And we'll talk more about his introduction in a moment, but this is his first mention.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, Brother Mouzone, they build up a lot of mystique around him before he even appears. So that should already give you some warning signs that this character is going to be pretty interesting, larger than life. There is that one scene where Stringer, I think, goes back to his Atlanta Connect. The big guy, Donnie Andrews, I think. And I assume that's kind of to validate the potency of Prop Joe's product. I think he gets him to test Prop Joe's product to check that it is, as he says it is, the fresh stuff off the boat. And the guy confirms that it is. So they're happy to start business. Otherwise, I think we're just left with those Brother Mouzone scenes, as you say. And unlike Omar, though, despite them being yin to yang with one another, Omar's introduction was, I remember we made a big point of it on the podcast, very low-key. He was introduced as just another guy on the street, whereas with Brother Mouzone here, he has an unbelievably dramatic introduction that takes a good 2 minutes out of the episode. So it was kind of interesting to see the way they did that.
Yeah, it's a very grand entrance for any Wire character.
Yeah.
Following this very starkly contrasted character who's very well dressed, and he's got like his bow tie, and walking through the project. So it's quite a grand entrance
Serenely
for any
says,
character, indeed.
Yeah, serenely kind of says hello to the police officer and goes about his day. So yeah, it's they're clearly making a point here that don't expect this guy to be on the same wavelength as anyone else.
He's not your ordinary killer.
Yeah, we're changing things up a little bit here.
And you have to admit, there are some slightly like campy scenes.
Yeah,
with Brother Mouzone, as he's a great character and everything, but especially when him and Omar end up, obviously working together, it's very weird.
I mean,
the two of them together are like comic book superheroes. It does kind of take a slightly different turn with the two of them on screen at once.
Yeah, overall, those scenes I think they're all enjoyable, but I think at the end of the day, they probably detract from the show. From what they're trying to do, building this really kind of real world, and they introduce these weird hyper real elements. So it's kind of cool to see his introduction, though. I like the character overall. It's a big breath of fresh air, at least. Yeah,
it's just like a bit of light relief, I guess.
Yeah,
if nothing else.
I've kind of, whilst he is jarring, I'm fascinated by what they want Mouzone to represent as well, and I'm really not sure I know the answer to that. But there's lots of connotations. There's the whole Malcolm X thing going on, and there's I'm sure there's a bunch of other interpretations there, but it's never made clear, which is something I quite like as well. So.
Yeah, very mysterious character.
Yeah,
and it starts off that way. Starts off with lots of mystique, as you say.
And he arrives just after Colvin and Mello decide to end the kind of watching over the district to get the peace back into order, and Colvin says, "Pretty damn quiet today." Actually, I think that's Mello, and then Colvin says, "Today," ominously, as Brother Mouzone turns up as their car pulls off, just to kind of make the point very clear.
Yeah, not for much longer.
Nope.
So, is there anything else that you want to talk about with the episode in general?
I don't think so. I feel like I need to mention Prop Joe's Chinese cemetery line, because it's possibly one of my favourite lines in the show. Absolutely adore it. So I'll just bring that up, just so we can take a moment to remember that and enjoy it, and then go back to something else. And I quite like his shop, like the really kind of green filtered windows. Streaming that green in. All that money.
Oh, something else that I was going to mention that we haven't really covered yet is when obviously the FBI arrived to talk to Frank. He looks absolutely terrified. It's like Frank Sobotka looks really scared by the arrival of these FBI agents. So he realises what he might be getting himself into. I mean, he turns out not to be a problem for him personally, but his heart was clearly in his mouth when that happened. Yeah,
that's true. I guess he understands that they've taken this time off, and they've had the paranoia. Now it's time to get back to work. And nope, sorry. But yeah, as you know, it turns out that they're here for the Colombians, so he's actually okay at the moment. It's a nice red herring.
And another preparation for season 3, I suppose you could say, is a repetition again of Stringer telling someone to lock the door, which we've seen him do multiple times, asking people to lock doors, and eventually, when it comes to the scene where he's killed, it's locked doors that make him trapped.
Yeah.
That's one of my favourite kind of like hinting towards a character's death. Like it's wonderfully done, and mentioned in quite a few times. And like I say, a mention of it here, when after he talks to Bodie, I believe.
That's it. Yeah, Bodie leaves and he has to lock the door behind him. Yeah, that's really, really nice. All those things have been set up so long in advance. And I mean, we haven't talked about that scene much at all, actually, but I do enjoy that scene where Stringer really understands that Bodie is a climber and that he should be put in these kind of almost managerial positions for all that he's learned.
Yeah.
And it's nice to see that he really completely understood that interrogation more than the police did, practically. He had a real grasp of their game, which they started off by saying, look, you're unbelievably stupid, and you don't know it. That's part of the stupidity. So they just threw it right back at them. And they underestimated Bodie like the Greeks underestimated the police.
That's true, yeah.
It's all just kind of a bunch of people that are playing a game.
The Colombians, I think. They take our chemicals and pay less than promised. And down there, I understand everyone is a terrorist now. Judges are killed, bombs go off in the street. It's very bad.
Filemo. The Colombians cheated us. They are not with the guerrillas. They're trash.
The world is a smaller place now. And the FBI cares very much about such things. Fair is fair. Eh?
So let's move on to our final sections.
Yeah.
And let's begin with our notable characters this week. I'm going to avoid using the word favourite this time.
Yeah. I'd like to fly the flag for Spiros.
Okay.
I really, really liked his scenes this episode, particularly the one with Nick. The one with Eton was great when he talks about the way the Greek kind of has a philosophy on business. And, if a business deal goes bad, you're never angry about it, you're just smart about it, and you find the best way around it. It's really nice that he explained that, and I like seeing how endearing he was towards Nick. It's quite heartwarming. So, he's a character that I'm really deeply kind of caring about really now, and as there were some good scenes here, I thought it was time to fly the flag for him. Other honourable mentions, though: Bodie, Prop Joe, Valchek, McNulty, all have some very good moments in this episode.
Yeah, I very much a fan of Spiros as well, and in a similar vein, I was going to give a shout out for the Greek himself. Not a widely seen character, but when he is on screen, I think he's wonderfully portrayed. And the scene where they're at the dinner and they're sort of talking about the business with the Colombians, came across as quite a sinister character there when he's talking about the world being a smaller place and the FBI cares very much. Just that sort of wicked grin on his face. Yeah, it's quite a sinister character and very subtly played, but very enjoyable to see on screen. I always like seeing the Greek.
Yeah, very good choice.
But the two of them together are excellent. I was also going to give a shout out for Bodie, who is really good in this episode, like you say, and see his potential being recognised. And likewise, I think it's impressive when any character can layer up those accents like that, doing impression of an impression. So yeah, good McNulty episode too.
Yeah. What about
more in terms of light relief than anything else?
Relief. In many forms. So, speaking of that, what about your favourite scene? Is it going to be that brothel scene? Or are you going to be bold?
It is great. It's probably the most kind of, in a way, it's one of the most entertaining scenes for sure. I am quite tempted to say the scene with Prop Joe and Stringer, because I think that's a really interesting connection between the two of them, and Prop Joe is just fantastic with Stringer as well. We see their sort of philosophies towards the street colliding somewhat, and they find that common ground, which makes it really nice. And I think, I don't know, I'm trying to think if there's anything else. I guess the meeting as well with Valchek, that's a good scene as well. There's kind of a lot going on there in regards to how the details have progressed, how Valchek has been completely left out in the cold by the whole thing. Burrell, with his experience, realizing that the more patience is needed. There's kind of a lot of things going on in what is otherwise quite a routine scene, just people getting together for a briefing.
Yeah.
What about yourself?
Yeah, similar really. I put down McNulty in the brothel. I think I'm going to pick that as my favourite in this episode, just because it is, as you say, one of the most entertaining in the entire run of the show. Valchek's progress check, as you mentioned as well. Stringer chatting with Prop Joe. It's just a mirror image, really. Spiros and Nick having their professional relationship build. And yeah, those were kind of my main ones. Not that opening scene, surprisingly, considering that's quite a prominent action sequence in this season. Unmemorable, inconsequential ultimately, and it just made me think about the wise other action sequences and the more memorable ones, like the one where Tosha, I think it's Tosha, she gets shot in early season 3, which is a great moment because Omar and Dante genuinely have some gun skills, so they actually they can place some shots that hit, and also of course the field interviews that we've been through, which pretty horrifying horrifying action sequence at least.
It's telling that the show takes that opening scene where a child gets accidentally killed and detaches us from it. Like it isn't a particularly notable scene in terms of being memorable or being especially emotionally memorable. It seems to make a point of detaching us from that it is just another moment and that nobody else will sort of care about it either, except for the immediate family who are left grieving.
Yeah, it's very
and everyone
true.
else is just bothered about it in a kind of economic way. What a nuisance, we've got to start business for a while. It totally removes you from the fact that a child has been killed by a bullet on in a residential area.
It's great, and it really feels like the episode allows the viewer to feel that as well, where it opens up with this huge, important murder scene, really, and by the time the credits roll, that's the last thing on your mind. Like, you can barely remember it. So I think that's a really nice way of conveying it to the audience.
So speaking of that, let's take a look at our title, which is Stray Rounds. Not the most subtle of titles, but there's definitely more than just its obvious reference to talk about. What do you think of this title?
Yeah, as you say, obviously the gunfight and the bullet hitting the boy is the obvious reference here. But I also think, I didn't find too many. I found how the detail aimed at Sobotka to begin with under Valchek's command and hit others in the process, completely avoiding Sobotka. So that kind of is more of a metaphorical use of the stray round. And perhaps also the stray rounds can refer to the guns that got lost on the boat. Kind of stray rounds landing on that boat. It's a bit more of a tenuous one.
I was thinking Avon straying from... Stringer straying from Avon's set path, even after he goes from with Brianna passing on the message about taking giving the territory to Prop Joe.
Yeah.
Avon even continues to stray from the path that has been given to him by his supposed superior.
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah. So nice interpretations.
And our epigraph: "The world is a smaller place now," says the Greek. This, I must admit, is possibly one of my favourite epigraphs. I think it's excellent. I think it's excellently delivered as well. I think in context that scene is very good.
Yeah.
Very sinister, delivered in a very sinister way. Obviously, it's talking about the telecommunications of the wire, as you mentioned earlier, how everything being connected through all these channels that people are trying to dip in and out of. We see it in examples of people passing and travelling long distances, such as Agent Kutris. So, literally speaking, it's just talking about technology democratizing a lot of aspects of society, making travel much easier, making communication something that is more easily laid out as data and information that people can tap into.
Yeah, excellent. So it's very, very broadly applicable to the show. And of course, it also applies strongly to the Sobotkas, who are kind of the enemies of globalization, who are losing out to the global formula of outsourcing and innovation that comes with it.
Yeah, that's very true.
And I guess there's perhaps a more literal interpretation of it, being that with all the murder that goes on in Baltimore, the city really is a smaller place every day.
I wonder how the birth rate stacks up to the death rate.
That's where the logic starts to get in the way. But yeah, definitely.
Have to look that up. So yeah, that is Season 2, Episode 9, Stray Arounds. Next episode, Episode 10...
Storm Warnings.
Storm Warnings, that's the one. Yeah, we'll be back next week, and the episode will be out on the 20th. That's next Friday. And don't forget that you can check out all of the previous episodes and our blog and all of that sort of stuff at caughtonthewire.wordpress.com. And feel free to shoot us an email at caughtonthewire@gmail.com or the contact page on our website. And thank you very much for joining us. We will see you next week.
See you then.
What you know about Baltimore? What you know about Baltimore? Baltimore. What you know about Baltimore?